Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. And I want to warn you, this is going to be a doozy. So please bear with me. So every now and then, I have people that will reach out to me that I have kind of like a personal parasocial relationship with. They're longtime viewers or subscribers of this channel, or in certain instances like this, they're other content creators or social media influencers that know my work. We've corresponded several times. Maybe, maybe not. They've used my consulting services, and we still keep in touch. So what happened was somebody reached out to me and they said, "Hey, Sean, I want to show you a screenshot of this post on Facebook, and I would love to get your take on this. I would love if you would personally respond to me on what you think about this." And I looked at it and I said, gee, for me to respond to this, it's going to be like a 5-page email. So I said to this individual, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put this on the back burner. When I get around to it, I will actually record a video and respond to this directly and allow all my viewers and subscribers to see my response in real time. So that's why we're having this conversation. Now, before I get into the post in question and who created it on Facebook, I want to make this very clear. I am not cutting up the person or the entity who posted this. I want to make that very clear right out of the gate. I am merely attacking this particular post. I do not know the person who posted this from Adam. I have no idea who this individual is. I can tell you, I looked at some of his other posts on Pokemon from an investment standpoint, and some of them are spot on. Some of them are very good. They're very detailed. Great analysis for what he puts out, given the fact that it's 100% free information. Now, without further ado, I am going to now announce who posted this, what it was, and we're going to respond to it in full because I honestly take a lot of issue with this current post. So this was put out on Facebook by somebody that goes by the name of Pokey Insider. And like I said, a lot of his other posts are 100% spot on. This particular individual has 13,000 followers on Facebook right now, and they're rightfully earned. I want to be very clear. This is the only current post of his that I take an issue with. That's why we're talking about it on this channel. So I'm going to read this post in full. We're going to break it down line by line, and I'm going to give you my response. And you let me know in the comment section what you think. So here we go. Here's the post in full. People say Pokemon can't be an investment, or they call us quote-unquote scalpers. But I can list off more Pokemon cards that have increased over 150% in 1 year than stocks that have increased 150% in 5 years. People deny the fact that Pokemon has outperformed the S&P by 3,000 plus percent since 2003. People say that Pokemon is the next Beanie Baby. But Pokemon has been around for 30 years, longer than most businesses have been around. Pokemon is expected to be over $13 billion in market value by 2035. Pokemon has the nostalgia that not very many things have. It was and still is a major part of people's lives. Will there be low periods? Of course, it's just like any market. But long term, there aren't many better investments. Last point, it took me 15 years to 4 times my money in silver. I can 4 times my money in Pokemon within 6 months consistently. Let that sink in. Hate all you want and miss out. Okay. Now this post is written in a very antagonizing manner. It also uses a lot of generalizations. And I don't understand, looking at other posts made by Pokey Insider, why he posted this, because it almost stands out from a lot of his more analysis-driven posts that he puts out, which I do support. So I am going to respond to this because I think it's very poorly written. I think it really, really lacks the analysis of some of his other posts. And it's also very antagonizing. It uses a lot of generalizations. And that's really why I am responding to this on camera. So let's begin at the beginning and start with the first statement here. People say Pokemon can't be an investment, or they call us scalpers. Well, who says that Pokemon can't be an investment? Because almost everybody I know who is attempting to speculate or invest in Pokemon, or even just casual collectors who are active in the community, they all think that Pokemon is a great investment overall. Even people who are educated in finance but may not have an interest in investing in collectibles or what I call collectible finance, there's a lot of people out there that are pretty much amazed at what Pokemon has done from an investment standpoint over the last few years. As a matter of fact, I spend a lot of my time talking to these individuals, explaining the idiosyncrasies of the market and why it has soared in value over the last 5 to 10 years or so. So I don't know who you mean when you say people say Pokemon can't be an investment. If they're outside of the realm of the collectible space or the financial space, does it really matter what those people think? I mean, in all honesty, there's a lot of people that think the entire stock market is going to crash and just go to zero overnight. There's a lot of people that tell me that the S&P 500 is extremely risky and anybody investing in that should use a lot of caution. I'm here to tell you, those individuals are very wrong. Those individuals are not educated in finance. So why do I care what people like that think? If anybody is telling you that Pokemon can't be an investment and they're not directly involved in the Pokemon community, why do you care? Why do you give them credence? That's what really sets me off the minute that I read just the first statement of this post. You go on this state, or they call us scalpers. Who is calling you a scalper? Okay, I'm educated in the antiques and collectibles trade. I've been in these markets since the age of 12. Nobody educated in the antiques and collectibles trade is going to call you a scalper simply because scalpers don't exist in modern era collectible markets. Because in order to be called a scalper, you're typically dealing with like a sporting event or an event in general where there's limited seating and you're scalping those tickets. The reason why it's called scalping is because they can't just produce more seating for that event. When we talk about modern era collectibles, they're not scalpers, meaning if you're engaging in reselling these items for a profit, you're actually a reseller. Because in all honesty, the manufacturer who is producing these items, they can at any time produce more to meet demand. They usually just don't want to, or usually the collectible in nature, in this regard, Pokemon cards from the modern era, are in a massive speculative euphoria where manufacturing cannot currently keep up with demand. That's really not good over the long term, because if you know anything about the modern era collectibles trade, usually items that are hoarded in mass only for their investment potential, those usually are very bad investments over the long term. That's what led to the junk wax era of sports cards. That's also what led to the over-hoarding of the Power of the Force 2 Star Wars figures that came on the scene right around 1995, 1996. They had the green and orange card backs that were produced by Hasbro back then. A lot of people thought that that second iteration of Star Wars figures was going to be worth money one day. Well, everybody went out, bought them, hoarded them, kept them factory sealed. Today, most of those figures are actually worth less than what they sold for back in the mid-1990s. So when we analyze something like this, where people say Pokemon can't be an investment or they call us scalpers, I think that you need to be aware that both of those statements, even within the community, meaning the Pokemon community, can still be seen as negative. It doesn't mean that these items are a guaranteed bona fide investment that's always going to go up in value. Always remember, guys, the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change, especially over the long term. Now let's analyze statement 2 off this wonderful post. But I can list off more Pokemon cards that have increased over 150% in 1 year than stocks that have increased 150% in 5 years. Okay, I don't I don't think you understand the complexity of financial asset investing. When we value a company, it's very, very different and more complex than analyzing a piece of cardboard, a Pokemon card, a sports card, or any type of collectible for that matter. When we look at financial assets, they have underlying cash flows. There's a lot of variables that go in to valuing a company. All is what a share of stock is. It's equity ownership into an actual publicly traded company. So this is where you're kind of comparing apples to oranges. This analysis really doesn't fit. And the fact that you state that I can list off more Pokemon cards that have increased over 150% in 1 year than stocks that have increased 150% in 5 years. You are aware it takes a lot less effort to create a new Pokemon card than it does to launch a publicly traded company. So right there, the analysis falls apart. You also really have to take a step back, and this is where I question if you are educated in finance. And forgive me if you are, but most people that I know who are educated in finance wouldn't make a statement like this for the reasons I also provided, and also for the fact I don't think you realize how many different individual publicly traded companies there are out there, where I don't know how many Pokemon cards you're looking at that have increased over 150% in 1 year. But number one, the Pokemon market in general, especially of the modern era, is in a massive speculative euphoria at present time. When we look at stocks that have increased 150% in 5 years, again, we're using different fundamentals to analyze the value of those companies and their share price versus that of pieces of cardboard. So this is where, again, I have to take a step back, and I have to now acknowledge that you're most likely not educated in finance. I'm sorry to tell you, because you would not have ever made this comparison if you were. You go on to state, people deny the fact that Pokemon has outperformed the S&P 500 by 3,000 plus % since 2003. Okay, I don't understand why you're so antagonizing in the way you're wording this. People deny. What people are denying this? If anybody is following you on Facebook, chances are they already are involved in the Pokemon market in some manner, or have an interest of investing or speculating in these products. As a result, I can assure you, nobody is denying the fact that Pokemon has outperformed the S&P 500 by 3,000% since 2003. My question to you, turning this back around, do you understand why that occurred? What catalysts happened in the market that caused that to happen? Because when I talk to a lot of Pokemon speculators, especially the younger set, they just look at the line on the graph and they see it going up, and they don't understand how markets work. They don't understand how markets operate. Right now, again, Pokemon has been in a massive speculative euphoria. At some point, this is going to end. At some point, we're going to get into an area of the market that more represents what was happening back around 2003, 2004, where Pokemon was in a lull. And there's no guarantee it's going to go up from there. Always remember, markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. Markets do not just go up and down. Markets can go sideways for many, many years and stay there. That is a risk you are taking. Now, spoiler alert, I want to name some of the catalysts that occurred in the market since 2003 that caused Pokemon products to outperform the S&P 500 by 3,000 plus %. Back in 2003, YouTube didn't exist. Facebook didn't exist. Social media in general didn't exist. You didn't have third-party grading. You didn't have social media influencers, auction companies, grading companies propping up these markets. You didn't have a generation that grew up under the pressure of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, no longer trusting the stock market to the point where in 2026, a lot of these individuals can't even afford to buy a house of their own. So they're looking at other ultimate asset classes, other quick rich scams where they think they can 10 times their money very quickly. Pokemon and other related collectibles and assets of that nature have become very appealing. This is also what's giving the rise of interest in meme stocks, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, even precious metals, as we are also going to comment in, because that's towards the end of this post. You have to look at what variables took place in the market that led to this to occur. Because I assure you, if I took you in my DeLorean time machine and we went back to 2003, I guarantee you back then you would not be looking at this market going, hey, all the fundamentals are there. The Pokemon marketplace is going to outperform the S&P 500 by thousands of percents in another 20 to 23 years. No one thought that back then. Very few individuals had that much faith in Pokemon, and I can prove it to you. Because if we look back in 2003, 2004, do you know what the most valuable licensing property in the world was back then? It was not Pokemon. It was Star Wars. Star Wars was the bona fide king back then, not Pokemon. Pokemon was popular. It was gaining in dominance. But again, right around 2003, 2004, believe it or not, that was right around the time when WotC stopped producing Pokemon cards, Wizards of the Coast. Nintendo came in with Game Freak, and they started handling their own publishing. And at that particular point, if you guys remember, this is one of the reasons why Skyridge is one of my favorite sets from that particular point in time, because it had a fairly low print run. Well, today, with the massive demand in Pokemon products, Skyridge is highly coveted. That's why booster boxes and some of the most coveted cards, especially in PSA 10 condition, sell for tens of thousands of dollars on the secondary market. Again, back then, very few people would have predicted that. So you have to look at how we got here. This is something that people in the Pokemon community refuse to do. When you have rose-colored glasses on, every flag looks like a flag. You don't see red flags clearly. There's a lot of red flags in this market, especially over the long term. In the year 2026, almost everybody out there that is collecting and buying modern era Pokemon cards are doing so from an investment standpoint. They're buying this stuff. They're either keeping it factory sealed, they're buying multiples, or they're carefully opening this stuff, sending it to PSA to be graded, and a lot of this stuff is coming back in PSA 10 condition. If you don't believe me, you've done the research yourself, Poke Insider, on your own Facebook page. Look at the population reports of vintage PSA 10 coveted cards versus that of modern era counterparts. And you're going to see the spread is massive. I myself made, just by accident, a ton of money in the Pokemon market if I would go to sell. I have a coveted collection of vintage PSA 10 Pokemon cards that are now worth more than six figures simply because of the price increases that have occurred in the market over the last 5 to 10 years. It is completely insane. So I don't disagree. I want to be very clear here that Pokemon has outperformed the S&P 500 by 3,000% since 2003. But your post is very antagonizing because you state people deny that fact. Who is denying that fact? Numbers don't lie, but liars figure. Did you ever hear that statement? Maybe those people that are denying it, they're not involved in this market. Who cares what they think if they're not directly involved in the market? Going onward, people say that Pokemon is the next Beanie Baby. I'm sorry. Who says this? If you listen to my channel, if you listen to any of the criticisms that I have raised against modern era Pokemon collecting, hoarding, investing, speculating, whatever you want to call it, I have never once compared Pokemon to Beanie Babies directly. I have compared Beanie Babies to Funko Pops and Labubus. Where I talk about Pokemon in the context of Beanie Babies is when I state, when we look at a speculative euphoria, the dynamics are the same. Regardless of if we're talking about rare coins, Pokemon cards, comic books, Beanie Babies, Funko Pops, or Pez dispensers. The speculative euphoria dynamics that govern all those markets are exactly the same. You have a frenzy where people come in, they think they're going to get rich off the product, they start hoarding the product, they start coveting the product in either ultra near mint condition or factory sealed condition. And this is what leads to hoarding and mass speculation. That's where that aspect of Pokemon is exactly like the Beanie Baby craze. But you're absolutely right. Pokemon cards do have organic collectability. Beanie Babies did not. But the dynamics, the fundamentals that make up a speculative euphoria, they're the same. Whether we're talking about Pokemon cards, Beanie Babies, the rare coin bubble that happened in the 1980s, the great video game bubble that just happened a few years back with the advent of WATA that crashed and burned, all of those fundamentals are the same. So that's something that I got to correct you on. You go on the state, but Pokemon has been around for 30 years, longer than most businesses have been around. Now, I want to respond to that first. You are correct. If we look at the numbers, if somebody starts a business, chances are there is a very high degree of probability that within the first 5 years, that business is not going to survive. It's like 80 to 90%. So to state, Pokemon has been around for 30 years, longer than most businesses have been around. You are correct, but that's really nothing surprising when you break down the survival rate of most small businesses that are just starting out. You go on to state, Pokemon is expected to be over $13 billion in market value by 2035. Let me quick respond to that. That number is true. I did my own research. You're 100% spot on with that number. The problem is, how much of that $13 billion is being purchased or being acquired by collectors and true lovers of the product, and not just the speculators, investors, and hoarders that are looking at a line on the graph going, line keeps going up, I'm going to hoard more and more of this. And the Pokemon company, in order to make that metric, they're printing more and more cards. So you're not really being honest about why that number is rising to 13 billion. It's because they're producing more and more cards, more and more products to meet that demand. And the speculators and the investors are all constantly hoarding that product in mass. That's really not the sign of a healthy market. I've said this before. Other Pokemon YouTubers out there, like Rudy with Alpha Investments, they all agree with me. There needs to be a significant pullback in this market. There needs to be a market pullback to scare away a lot of the speculator Timmies and Kimmies out there that are just hoarding product because line on graph keeps going up. That's very dangerous territory that we are entering into. You go on to state, Pokemon has the nostalgia that not very many things have. It was and still is a major part of people's lives. Look, I'm sorry to say this. I understand that you have an emotional attachment to Pokemon. You could replace Pokemon in that sentence with everything. Vintage Star Wars, vintage toys, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Marvel comic books, DC comic books, vintage sports cards. Take your pick. It's not unique to Pokemon. Please quit making this seem that Pokemon lives in a vacuum devoid of all fundamentals. Everybody who collects something or even invests in it, if they understand collectible finance, they have usually an emotional attachment to these items. So they're always going to defend their favorite collectible to the death. I went through this many times with Pez dispenser collectors, with Power of the Force 2 Star Wars collectors back in 1995, 1996. Well, Sean, you don't understand the market. Look at what the vintage figures are going for. And I had to explain to them, everybody wasn't hoarding the vintage Star Wars figures. They're hoarding this stuff that's being produced now because they think line on graph is going to keep going up. And it didn't. You can see where I'm going with this. We can tie this into the great video game bubble. A lot of the people that bought into the wad of hype. Sean, everybody loves Nintendo. Everybody loves Mario. I play Mario with my kids today. I go to the store, I get the latest Mario game, we pop it in the Nintendo Switch, we sit down, we have fun. All these kids growing up, they're all going to want to invest in Nintendo video games as a result. Is that really how that market turned out? No, the market lost 90 to 95% of its value. The great video game market is seen by a lot of insiders in the antiques and collectibles trade as a joke. I'm sorry to tell you that. There's a lot of people that still do not understand this, and it really pains me to say that because it was freaking a massive, alleged, speculative, manipulated bubble that eventually burst. And that's why, I hate to say this, a lot of people that look at these markets, they don't look at the risk involved in investing and speculating in these markets, especially over the long term. You have to look at both ends of the equations. You can't just pick and choose and go, well, everybody loves Pokemon. It has a lot of nostalgia. It's a part of all of our lives. You can say that about anything that's collectible, anything that's pop culture related. You could even, if you really wanted to make an argument, you could say that about Funko Pops, for crying out loud. And we know that market's on thin ice because, again, that is Beanie Babies 2.0. You see where I'm going here. Next, you go on to state, will there be low periods? Of course, it's just like any market, but long term, there aren't many better investments. Look, I understand that you believe that, and I understand you're going to come back to this point. Well, Sean, from 2003, Pokemon has outperformed the S&P 500 by 3,000 plus %. I get that. Again, line on graph go up. Therefore, you're looking at this. All these products, all these modern era cards, they're just going to keep growing in demand, and the line on the graph is just going to keep going up. I'm here to tell you that is not realistic. That is not reality. Now, if you said, hey, I think Pokemon can be part of a well-diversified portfolio, provided you understand the market dynamics and the risks, I would agree with you. I would agree with you 100%. The way that this is worded, that there aren't many better investments, just because you're cherry picking data from 2003 to today and saying, hey, look, line kept going up, therefore Pokemon's a great investment, there is nothing better, I disagree with that 100%. I'm sorry to tell you this. You go on to state, last point, it took me 15 years to 4 times my money in silver, and this is where I have concerns. You are aware, over the long term, precious metals are a horrible investment. I just want to make that very clear. You know, I recently put out a video where I talked about the influence of current high precious metal prices and the effect that it has on the overall antiques and collectibles trade. If you do any amount of research, you're going to see there have been massive periods where precious metals have done nothing on the secondary market, where you don't even collect a dividend. There's no underlying cash flows. You guys that are looking at the precious metal markets right now and you're amazed at the price of gold, maybe even the price of silver, even though it did pull back substantially over the last few days, over the last week or so, what you guys got to understand is you're technically being paid for all the time that you had zero return or a negative return in that market. You got no dividend, you got no underlying cash flow. Collectibles work the same way. Collectibles work best as a potential diversification hedge. They should never, ever be the main course. If you are using Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, gold, silver, or collectibles as the main portion of your investment portfolio, at some point you're going to get slapped in the face with a stale donut. It is not going to work over the long term, with few exceptions that I can point to due to certain catalysts that occurred in the trade. Case in point, if we look at what happened with comic book investing. 2000, 2001, CGC came on the scene, started third-party grading comic books. Then you had, literally 7 years later, the Marvel Cinematic Universe appeared, with the first movie being Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr., who just played the part perfectly. That set off a massive boom in that market. But that is what is known as a near-perfect market. No one could have predicted that. Because if you get my DeLorean time machine, once again, I know we're traveling all over the place in this video, but if we go back to the 1990s, you are aware vintage comic books were in a lull. Nobody really cared about Amazing Spider-Man 129, Incredible Hulk 181, and Giant Size X-Men 1 in 1995, I'm sorry to say. Now in 2010, 2015, 2020, those comic books soared in value, but that was due to collector confidence in the market as a result of CGC and as a result of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Nobody back in the 1990s could have predicted those two developments. They acted as a severe catalyst in that market. That's what I'm telling you. You have to be very careful, because when we put on rose-colored glasses and we look at utilizing 2020 hindsight, it's very easy to see, well, gee, back right around 2003, 2004, I should have invested in Pokemon cards. I would be a multimillionaire today. Do you see how stupid that sounds? You're cherry-picking data and you don't realize it. You go on to state, I can 4 times my money in Pokemon within 6 months consistently. Let that sink in. What you're not understanding is that is in today's current market environment. There's no guarantee that market environment is going to exist 5, 10, 20 years out where you can consistently 4 times your money in every 6-month increment. The reason why you can do that now is because the market is in a massive speculative euphoria. You must learn from this. It's no different. I'll give you a prime example. Coming out of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, I made a shit ton of money. Do you want to know why? Because we now know, if we look at the numbers, back in March of 2009, that was when the S&P hit the devil's bottom, they called it. It was because the S&P, I think, hit 666, 3 sixes, March of 2009. Well, coming out of that period, as soon as Barack Obama took office, as soon as the bailout was signed, the market couldn't go any lower. It was bound to go up. So all you had to do was keep investing in index funds, and you were going to make a ton of money over the next couple of years. The idiots that didn't make money were the ones that said, oh, nope, this is the end. It's all over. It's all going to go to zero. So the way that we're looking at this, I don't think that you understand the market environment that you find ourselves in is why you're able to 4 times your money in Pokemon within a 6 months time period. If that market environment changes, which you have no control over, you're no longer going to be able to 4 times your money every 6 months in Pokemon. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not guaranteed. You go on the state, hate all you want and miss out. I'm sorry to tell you, no one is hating on you. As a matter of fact, I like a lot of your posts. I want the best for you. But with this post, you are completely off your rocker. You are out there in cloud 9. It's like I read all of your other posts, came across this, and I was like, what? It doesn't even belong here. It makes no sense. This really causes you, for someone like me, let's say that I was only educated in finance, and I didn't have the experience, the credibility, the massive success that I've had in the antiques and collectibles trade. And I, just as a finance bro, was reading this post. This would really rub me the wrong way, because it proves to me that you don't understand, number 1, finance, number 2, collectible finance, more importantly, and number 3, you don't understand the idiosyncrasies of the market environment that you find yourself in. And that's what worries me the most. Now, on that note, I do have to sum up the video this way. All of your other posts have excellent content. Believe it or not, I am now one of your followers on Facebook, and that says a lot that you got Reserved Investments to follow your commentary on Pokemon investing, regardless of what I think about this post. But I'm going to tell you, if you continue to go in this direction, where you are antagonizing people who have a different point of view, I would encourage you to at least engage with them and maybe get them to provide their alternate argument to the points that you're trying to make. Because I really hate to tell you this. I'm educated in the antiques and collectibles trade. I'm also educated in finance. I read this post, and compared to all your other posts that you have up, this one just doesn't belong. I honestly would question if this was even written from you, if it wasn't posted by you, Poke Insider, directly. And that really says a lot. So I just want you to know, Please, you do expert analysis on Pokemon cards and products. But please do not try to comment on the market or attack people that disagree with you about Pokemon over the long term, because this post makes me believe that you do not understand the market dynamics that you yourself are investing in and profiting from. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Was I too harsh on this particular individual, Pokey Insider? Was it not harsh enough? I want to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. If you are subscribed, I will see you in another upcoming video.